Hello, welcome to another vlog. I'm Emma. I run Wizard Bikes, a custom frame building company here on Vancouver Island. I make mostly off-road bikes and ultra-distance bikes for people. So what are we doing this week? Last week we finished off a frame in the last video. If you haven't seen that, go watch that. And then this week we have to build a fork for that one. So the fork we're building for it is going to be a suspension corrected fork, which means it's like extra long so that when the customer takes their suspension fork out and puts in this rigid fork that we're going to build, the geometry of the frame isn't affected. And then it's also got 12 mil through axles so that the customer can run a generator hub that he already owns rather than buying a 15 mil one. And then after that, once we get the fork built, we'll start a gravel bike. Hopefully this week we'll start a gravel bike. Cut some tubes at least. We did it, folks. We friggin' built a fork. Just took us like, I don't know, a day and a bit, and we got this cool segmented fork, which matches the segmented seat stays back here. It's a suspension corrected fork, which means the customer's going to be running a 120 mil suspension fork most of the time. But then when he goes for bike packing trips, he can slap this guy on there, which is going to be a lot lighter, a lot more efficient. And then it's got fender mounts, triple bottle mount, and then you could also run a rack off of this. It's got a light mount on the front or a rack mount on the front. It's got my cool branding. It's got the world's greatest brake standard, IS, and a tapered steer, so it's super easy to swap between a suspension fork and this fork. Today, we're going through a box of tubes. Reynolds tubing, distribution in North America, just changed from Torch and File out of Portland to First Hand, also out of Portland. This is my first box of tubes from the new distro. Also my first box of tubes since the tariffs went into effect. I kept this order under $800 and I was able to get it over the border without any extra fees, which is nice. So let's dig in. First up is my favorite chainstays for gravel bikes. I find that this extra kick here works really, really well for getting like narrow crank clearance. So like even running road bike cranks on a gravel bike. This is the Reynolds FC1535, and pretty much every Wizard gravel bike and some cross-country bikes I run these chainstays on. This is a butted seat tube for 27.2, 550 length, and it's also a length that I would use this as a top tube on burlier gravel bikes. Because it's 1.2 millimeters at the head tube, essentially, it's nice and strong. I got two of those. This is a longer seat tube. I think this is a 650 seat tube. So same thing, seat tube for bigger bikes or a top tube for like cross-country bikes or burlier gravel bikes. This is a 35 mil down tube. For gravel bikes, I think it's an 858, like pretty thin long. And then this is the same seat tube, down tube. Same thing, seat tube, down tube. This is a 1 1/8 steer tube, pretty basic, not super thin. Reynolds makes a super light version of this that I use sometimes too, but this is more of like a standard duty version. And I think in here, one 1/8 head tube, a thicker wall one. I think it's a 1.2 1 1/8 head tube, so you don't need to run head tube rings on this one. And I think that's it. Pretty small order. I really wanted to keep it under the $800 for the tariffs. I think it was like $750 Canadian. So we got one head tube, one steer tube, 5 seat tubes, 3 down tubes, and 5 chainstays. So normally I try and put my brake mounts on the seat stays rather than the chain stays, because on the chain stays you run into a bunch of clearance issues with the seat stays. But for this bike, it's going to be a gravel bike, and for my gravel bikes I do different cable routing than my mountain bikes. The cable routing goes through the down tube and along the bottom of the chainstay. And to keep that on both sides with the drivetrain and the brake, I really want to put this post mount or mountain bike mount brake on the chainstay of this bike. So I've come up with a bit of a gizmo, a gadget, if you will, so that I can check all the clearances of the chains of the seat stays without actually brazing or even tacking the brake mount onto the bike. So I've got my FAR Frameworks brake jig here set up for ISO rear. I've got an ISO 160 adapter that I've drilled the threads out of. And then I've just got this long M6 that takes my brake mount, my brake adapter, and my jig all in one to kind of hold everything in place so that I can put it into the jig and then figure out if these 1/2 inch stays, which I was originally planning, are going to work, or if I'm going to have to go down to a 3/8 stay, which I still use fairly often, but wasn't the original plan for this bike. And then if I go with the 3/8 stays, it means that I actually have the proper bender, so I can actually put a kink in the seat tube to get it around the brake if I want to. The main things I'm kind of looking for clearance for is full left and right adjustment on the brake caliper, and then also access to the brake adapter mounting hardware. Oh my goodness, hello. Welcome to the end of the vlog. Look at all this. We did all this together. So this week, we built up this fork. A suspension corrected 29er bike packing fork with fender mounts, rack mounts, and 12 mil axles. Pretty special. It's gonna go to the East Coast with this frame once I get it painted up. And then we unboxed a bunch of Reynolds tubes, which is pretty cool. Really happy with all those tubes. And then we turned all of those tubes, or at least some of those tubes, into the front triangle for a new gravel bike, and the chainstay assembly for that same gravel bike with the chainstay mounted brake, which hopefully I'll be able to make work with a set of seat stays. Thank you for watching till the end. You can find me on social media at wizard.bikes, pretty much everywhere. Instagram, Blue Sky, Patreon, youtube.com. And then I have a newsletter. You can sign up to my newsletter from my website. I send out newsletters once a month or so. And if you like this t-shirt that I'm wearing, you can find it in my web store. Okay, see you next week. Bye!